Hello. All you missed was the intro slide, and we're on the important stuff now. So welcome, and the importance of data visualizations. So it's not only the final step of a data project, but a lot of times it's a necessary step in exploratory data analysis. And a lot of times you'll hear this abbreviated as EDA. And EDA is just exploring and getting comfortable with your data. So it also allows you to visualizing your data also allows you to find patterns like distribution shapes and anomalies like outliers in a data set. These visual representations can then help you make decisions about what statistical tests are appropriate based on the data. Like you might not be able to use a test that assumes normality if your distribution is heavily skewed. Lastly, visual aids are easier to digest than large blobs of text. So if you want everyone to understand and interact with your data project, you need to have appealing visualizations. Graphs and vizzes, what they're called in Tableau, can often convey ideas a lot more succinctly and intuitively than a person may be able to vocalize. Okay, so here you'll see just data visualization in everyday life. So on the left, you'll see some of my attempts to schedule meetings over email, which is text heavy and takes a lot of glancing over to check those times work for you. However, on the right, you'll see a when to meet, which is just a very simple idea of being able to see everyone's availability on one calendar. But the simple data visualization of time and date makes scheduling a whole lot easier. Okay, so here's an overview of a data project. It starts with the data cleaning if you have a messy data set, and this can take a long time. And then you move on to conducting analyses and data modeling. And then the last step is, should I have this? Okay. The last step is visualization and presentation. While this is, hyper simplified, and a lot of times this process is iterative, data visualization occurs in all three of these steps. So cleaning the data, perhaps you might want to visualize how many null values you have. Or in the conducting analysis, you might want to look at correlation between two variables, which you could do in like a heat map type of way. So while visualization is the last step, it's also the steps that is going to be most seen by others. So you want to make sure it reflects all your other unseen hard work. So Tableau's here to help us do that. Okay, so why Tableau? There are a lot of data visualization softwares out there. Why are we choosing to use Tableau? First of all, it is free. Tableau Public is free to everyone, and Tableau Desktop is free to UCLA students, which is great. And then it's also, you don't need to know any coding to be able to use Tableau. It has a drag and drop functionality, and there are a ton of resources online. I'm sure after this workshop, you are going to be inspired and want to maybe make some visualizations with your own data. And if you have any questions, you can just kind of type them into Google, and there's just tons of documentation online. Just a great, powerful tool. Okay, so now it is time to transfer over to Tableau. So I'm going to stop this share and start another shared screen. Okay, moving all my things around and share this screen. Okay, so here we are on just an empty desktop, and what you can do is, if you have it in your doc, you can go ahead and click it open. But what I typically do is I go to Finder. Sorry, let me get this over here. I go to Finder and I go to my applications, and then you'll see I have Tableau Desktop and Tableau Public. You can use either one for this workshop. I will be using Tableau Desktop, and there will be one difference along the way, but they're both extremely easy to use. So let's open up Tableau Desktop, and you'll see it'll take me back to my previous one that I'm working on. So I'm just going to say new, and it's popping up down here. And then I'm going to take this over to my clean desktop. Okay, so you might see something like this, but more likely if you've just opened up Tableau, you'll see something like this. So if you have already downloaded the data, you should be able to find the data in your downloads. For me, it is just traffic collision. I see it right here, but if not, you can search. And please feel free to speak up if you need help downloading the data, or put it in the chat. But yeah, seems like everyone's got the data. And now we're gonna just show off Tableau's amazing drag and drop functionality, and drop it in. And now we're all set up. So here is this landing page, and it kind of just gives you an overview of how Tableau has interpreted the data so far. So it's interpreted DR number as a number, which you can see by this icon. It's interpreted date as a date variable, and then you'll see it has interpreted crime code description as a string variable. So let's go ahead and start making our first visualization. So we're going to go down here to sheet 1 in orange. And now that we're in here, this is the common setup. So let's get familiar with this panel on the left here. So at the top, we'll see the name of our data, and then we will see all the variable names, aka column names. So there are 4 types of general data in Tableau. There are dimensions, which are going to be qualitative values such as names, dates, or geographical data. And you can use dimensions to categorize, segment, and reveal details in your data. So dimensions are all these values above this faint gray line you see here. And then there's also measures, which are quantitative values. And these are measures that are going to be aggregated, and yeah, so that's a difference between dimensions and measures, but then there's also a difference between discrete variables and continuous variables. And so for here right now, they're coinciding with each other. All the dimensions are discrete because they're blue, you'll see, and then it has interpreted all the measures as continuous and they're green. Okay, so that's just a little bit lay of the land. And now we'll get started with making our first visualization. So let's go ahead and name this sheet what we want to visualize. So let's name it, just double click there, and we can type in accidents over time. And you'll see once we've inputted down here, it changes the title up here. So now we want to do over time. So how you can kind of interpret columns up here is columns is going to be the x-axis, horizontal, and then rows is going to be the y-axis. So we want time to be on the x-axis. So we can go ahead and see what time variables we have over here. We have date occurred, date reported, and then we have time occurred. Time occurred is just, the time within the day, and we want to represent over years. So we're going to use this date occurred field. And just go ahead and click on it and drag it over to columns. And now we'll see it'll appear here, your new row. However, we see that it is, because it is blue, it is discrete. So I typically like my date values to be interpreted as continuous. So how you change this is you right click on year, and then these are all the discrete interpretations, and then these are all the continuous interpretations. So let's do continuous year. And now you'll see it has changed to green. Okay, so now we want to put something, to go on the y-axis that's like accidents per year. So let's, look at our variables and see if there's any variable available. And you'll find that there's not. But what we do have is we have a unique identifier for every single accident, and that is called DR number. So if you were looking at, the metadata from the link that I sent on the lacity.org, it says the DR number is a unique number code given to each accident. So we're going to want to go ahead and use this to kind of create a new variable. So how we create a new variable from an existing variable is we right click it and we go down to create. And then we're going to say calculated field. And now what we're going to want to do is count how many accidents have occurred. And if you're familiar with SQL, the function is count, but it'll help you out. It kind of tells you what functions you can use, and you can use count or count distinct, but because they're distinct anyway, I just use count. And if you're ever curious about, you don't know what function to use, you can browse all the functions here, and it will kind of tell you a little bit about what they do. So yeah, there's that. And you'll see down here, it now says the calculation is valid. So let's go ahead and name our calculation as number of accidents. And we'll say, okay. And now you will see that it has appeared down here. It has this little equal sign next to it. So can anybody tell me what type of variable Tableau has interpreted this as? Is it a discrete dimension, a discrete measure, a continuous dimension, or a continuous measure? You can drop it in the chat, unmute yourself. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Raymond. It is a continuous measure because continuous, it's green, and measure, it is quantitative. So it's a number of accidents. So we'll go ahead and take this new variable and drag it into rows because we want this to be on the y-axis. And mine just takes a little second to load. But boom, you'll see here now that we have kind of accidents over time. So they're a study from 2010 to 2013. They increased a little bit, and it's quite interesting. They've appeared to drop during 2020 and 2021, which, we might hypothesize that could be attributed to the pandemic and less cars on the road. And then 2022 isn't a super reliable measure right now because we only have 1 month worth of data. Yes, you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a question. So it looks like, if you want to do pivot tables or any sort of graphs or reports, this is a very quick way to do it here. In Excel, it would take time to kind of filter the data. But I'm just curious if you wanted to change the data in the original source, or can you change the data once you upload it to Tableau, and then will it represent that in the new visualization?
Yeah, so you can't change the data in Tableau. It won't let you access a specific entry and change anything. So if you want to do any modifications to the data, I would suggest doing that before in Excel. Did that help?
Yeah, it helps. But if you were to upload it and then you have the file open, like the CSV file, and you make changes to it, will it get processed real time, or do you have to re-upload it every single time?
So you're gonna have to re-upload that. Tableau does have a super cool thing. You can do a live connection. But that's if you're working at a company and they have maybe a SQL Snowflake server set up or something, and then it can connect directly to databases and it'll update automatically. But if you're just doing your own data set, it might be a lot of work to set up a live connection.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So then now we want to add some spice, some dimension to this graph. So how do we do that? Well, we can use one of our dimension variables here. So something that I'm interested in looking at is the accidents over different areas in LA. So therefore, I'm going to take this dimension called area name and go ahead and drag it to color. So what this does is it gives a new line to each area name. And it also will create on the left, you'll see a legend, and it'll tell you what color responds to each area name. So we see that 77th Street tends to have a lot of accidents, and Foothill, whatever area this is in LA, tends to have less accidents. So congratulations, we have finished our first Tableau visualization, and we're going to go ahead and move on to our next one. So yes, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you show how to, sorry, I missed it, where you did the calculation for number of accidents again? I forgot what's the
Yeah, of course. So how you're going to do number of accidents that we have here is you're going to right click on DR number because it's your unique identifier. So if you're doing something in like Python, you might do group by and then, sum, but it's really actually easy to do it in Tableau. You just right click, create, calculated fields, and then the function we're going to use is called count. Make sure you put it in brackets so the word turns blue and it says the calculation is valid, and then we name this number of accidents. And then I won't save it again, but then you would say, yeah, okay, it's mad at me because this field already exists, but then you just say, okay. And then you'll see it appear down here, and then you can drag it up to the rows. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, so we're gonna kind of work on this visualization, but because we just want to keep this original one, we're just gonna make a copy. So how you make a copy is you right click on this accidents over time down here and say duplicate. And then you'll see here, it just has everything in the same exact place. And then we can kind of start from this. So what we're gonna do is make this an interactive visualization, and we're actually gonna animate it. So how we animate it is we use this. Is this blocking anything on my Tableau screen? Or is it just, I think maybe only I can see it. Hopefully you see my whole screen. Oh. Let me know if that's any issues, but I think that helps. Okay, cool. Okay, so here, this pages is going to be our animation box. So here, columns and rows are our basics area. Marks is when we want to kind of add color, change size. And then pages is kind of when we want to do an animation. So I want to animate it over time. So I'm going to drag date occurred into the pages. And then we'll see this new box appear down here. And because it's loading, it's taking its time. But the first thing we wouldn't want to do is, instead of it being an automatic mark, you'll see here this box automatic, we want to change it to circle. Yes, that's just one more time. We dragged date occurred into pages and just left it as is. And then we changed from automatic to circle. So now you'll see we have, I think it's 21 circles corresponding to each area name. And what we want to do is we want to show it over time. So in order to do that, we have to show history. Click down here. Marks to show history for all. Show marks trails in both. I used to use both, but now I just use trails because I don't want to circle at each point over time. I just want it to be a nice line and then have the circle indicate the current year that we're at. And yeah, so now that we have that, we can go ahead and press play. And mine is slow to load. So you'll see that it's going, now it's 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, but nothing has changed on here. But you'll see it's rendering now. So if you're at home on some good Wi-Fi, hopefully it'll do it in real time a little bit faster. But there you go. So now we have animated this visualization to show over time. Are there any questions? You can go ahead and unmute. Okay. And something I like to add to this one is dragging area name also to label. If you have good Wi-Fi, this is working great because then you can press play again and it'll put the names next to each circle. So you can kind of see how the names move and change. It just gives you a little bit more context. I'll just start it over and play it again. It's loading. It's going to take a little bit. But now you can see some of the names here. Because they're so close, it doesn't like to overlap names. So it only does a few, but I think it still adds to the presentation. Okay. So now what we're going to want to do is make a slight change to this visualization without losing what we've done thus far. So you know what that calls for? That calls for duplicating it. So right click, duplicate it. And now we're kind of on our third sheet. So instead of doing accidents over time, what if we wanted to represent like the running total of accidents over time? So let's go ahead and just change our name to be running total accidents over time. And there are some, calculations that we're going to have to do to make this work. Does animation transfer to PowerPoint? That is a good question. I've never experimented with Tableau and PowerPoint. I know if you are using Tableau Public and you were to save this, it would automatically upload to your Tableau Public profile. And then you could embed that link because it'll just like be a public website. And then you can embed that link into like HTML code and you can have it like appear on a website. Yeah. So how you duplicate the chart is you'll be on this accident over time number 2, and you'll just right click it and go up to duplicate and click it, and then it will create this. And all we did here was just change the name to running total accidents over time. So now what we're going to want to do is make some change to how this number of accidents is calculated. Right now it's just aggregated and it's just doing it by what's on the column. So it's aggregating it over year. So we can do a quick table calculation and we can just select running total. So now that we have running total selected, we want to make sure that it's computed using the right information. We want the running total to be over the dates. So that's why we're going to have to change this from table to be date occurred. So now we have a quick table calculation of running total, and we have compute using date occurred. So this is just a different way to visualize the same data, and it is still animated. So now my animation has run its course, but yeah. Okay, yeah, thanks for your question, Dana. What I think might be the issue is, this has happened to me several of times, is when you do quick table calculation running total, but you don't change compute using to date occurred, then it appears as the first one. You have to make sure that the compute using is date occurred. I hope that helped, and feel free to unmute if you have any questions. Yeah, during the animation segment, it may zigzag, just as, maybe harbor area name has less accidents in a certain year, and then it overtakes another one in a certain year. I'm sure my visualization would do the same if it was having an easier time loading. So yeah, you're just seeing it in real time. Yeah, Avneet.
I was wondering if you want several people to look at your Tableau report, or whatever data you've imported and kind of visualized, similar to Excel, where you can save the files in a folder and then people can access it, or you can have several people have the same file open at the same time. Are we able to do the same thing with Tableau, or how does that work?
That would be a Tableau online account, or a Tableau like professional account, and they cost a lot of money to be able to have several people work on the same ones.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so now that we've created 3 sheets, all kind of showing the same information but in different ways, let's go ahead and create a dashboard. So you'll see here, this first button says new worksheet. Nope, this second button says new dashboard. So that's what we're going to go ahead and click on, this middle button. So now we have dashboard 1. And what I want to do is put our accidents over time animated visualization, the number 2, and the number 3 in the same sheet. So this way, it just allows you to present a little bit more information in a smaller frame at the same time. And the most important thing to do when you create a dashboard is to make sure that it is interactive. So how you make sure it's interactive and you can click on it and edit things is you say use as filter. And then down here, we also say use as filter. So you just want to make sure these are both filled in. And you can kind of edit it and shape it to look how you want. And you can change the shape over here if you want it to be, bigger in width or thinner in width or bigger in height. And now, for example, if I click on 77th Street, it will filter this for both of the visualizations. There it is. And right now it's stuck on 2022, and that's why it's only showing 1 dot up here. Okay. Yeah, I just want to unclick that. So let me get everything back. And boom. That was just showing you kind of this uses filter. If you click one thing on one, it'll also filter it on the other one. Okay, so now we have our first dashboard, and we can go ahead and move on to making a map in Tableau. So let's go ahead and create a new worksheet. That's just this button down here, new worksheet. And we'll see our blank starting place. So how we want to create a map is we need, a location variable. So we see that we do have location, but it is treated as a string. So that's not going to be helpful for Tableau to understand and plot. So what we're going to want to do is go to data source. And this is if you're working in Tableau desktop. For some reason, this feature is only available in Tableau desktop, but you can do the same thing in your worksheet. If you're working in Tableau public, that I will show you shortly. But for those working in Tableau desktop, what we're going to want to do in this location, we can just say update automatically so we can see what location looks like. It has, latitude and longitude. So we're going to want to split it, and it will automatically determine the split to be the middle comma. So, but if it didn't, you could say a custom split and tell it what to split, but we can just go ahead and hit split. And then you'll see that it has created 2 new columns here, location split 1, location split 2, which is the latitude and the longitude. And let's just go ahead and rename these right here. Just double click and let's name it latitude, longitude. Are there any questions? Okay, so we're still not done. For these new calculated fields, you'll see the equals ABCs. We want them to be interpreted as, the numbers that they are, and then eventually the latitude and longitude points that they are. So what we're going to want to do is go here.
Julia,
instead of it being interpreted.
I just had a quick question. So I'm using Tableau public. And
Okay.
So I don't, am I right? I don't have the split option. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, you don't. Is it coming up for you or no?
No, can you show how you got to it again? Just by clicking on like the little down arrow. Okay, yeah. So, or at least in my version of Tableau public, I don't see split as an option. And did you? Maybe I missed it. Did you say that you were going to show us a way to do that, to sort of emulate the same thing in Tableau public next?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, thank you.
Okay. So for those that are still working in Tableau desktop, we can go ahead and click number decimal. And now it's a number, and do the same thing for longitude, number decimal. And you'll see it has taken away some of the preciseness, but I don't know why it does that, because it still does retain all the information. I don't know, it just wants to like simplify it here for looks, but trust me, it retains all the information. And then what we're going to want to do lastly, sorry, not the down arrow, but just this type again. So now number decimal, geographic role, and latitude. And now you'll see that it's successfully interpreted this as geographical data. That's what that little globe symbol is. So same thing with longitude. After we made it a number decimal, we're going to click geographic role, go over to longitude. Boom. Yeah, so if you split it and your thing is like this, because location is the last row, you might just have to scroll over. If after you hit split, then scroll with 2 fingers or use this little bottom scroller here, and they should appear here. And it'll say like location split 1, and then you have to change this to be number decimal and then geographic role. Okay, so let's do one more walkthrough of location splitting. So here's our location, and we're going to want to go ahead and click on this down arrow in the upper right portion of it, say split. And you'll see that it's created these 2 new things. This is just duplicating because I already have it. And then from here, you can rename it to, lat and long for latitude and longitude. And then for each of these, you'll see that there's still string types. So you want to make sure you change them to number decimal types. And then changing the type one more time. Geographic role, for the first one, we do latitude. For the next one, geographic role, longitude. Okay. And then for those that are working in Tableau Public, you will just have to do the same thing using create, like we did earlier with DR number. You can right click on your location, go down to create calculated field, and then let's search if there is, so there is a split function. So it returns a substring from a string as determined from the delimiter, extracting the characters from the beginning or end of the string. Okay, so split. I'm just looking at this last parameter. So split, we want to split it on the comma. And we want to get the first one is going to be our latitude. Okay, it's getting mad at me. Let me do latitude public just to represent that this would be how you do it in Tableau Public. I'm just looking at left and right because you might need to get rid of that initial bracket character. But let's just see what this latitude public kind of looks like. We go to our data source. Will it appear? Yeah, so we see we still have this bracket, but if we change it, let's see if it lets us change it. No, it doesn't let us change it to a. So we can click on this latitude public again and go up to edit. And then go to, I want to look if there's like a strip function. No, but there's not. So I'm just going to use a right function and just get everything except the one on the very right, which I think I can do with this -1. Let's just see if that. It didn't do it. Right. Let me try left -1, actually. No, it doesn't like that either. So you would just have to count how many characters are going to be in each one and then do right and like all the way up until the string. So like for each one, it's going to be, there's probably 20 characters. So maybe like 19 would exclude it. But I don't want to count through all them. Oh, wow. Okay. See, 19 has worked for some of them, but then it looks like maybe these ones have an extra character. So in Tableau Public, you might just have to look up a function to like strip the two curly brackets on either side. And a quick Google search might help us do this. Let me see.
So if
This is
I could,
kind of a
Julie,
Tableau.
I was gonna say, Julie, if other people aren't using this, you can go ahead and move on. I'll play
Okay.
around with it a little. It looks like there is a function called regex replace.
Okay.
So I can play around with that, and I'll post to the Etherpad the results. So I'll try to get that to work and post that
Okay.
there.
That would be great. Thanks so much. So I'm just going to cancel out of this making Tableau public. And for now, I'm going to delete the variable. Okay, I'm also just going to delete the duplicate of lat that I made from earlier just to walk through it again because we already have our latitude and longitude. Okay, so how we make a map in Tableau is actually surprisingly simple. So I've showed you before how you can drag and drop things, but with latitude and longitude, you can actually just double click them and Tableau knows where to put them. Latitude goes in the rows and longitude goes in the columns. For me, this takes a little while to load, but I'm hoping on your end that it is just showing up wonderfully quick. Can you just give me a thumbs up if yours is showing up for you? If you drag the longitude and latitude? Oh. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Cachet. And for those of you that do not have a thumbs up, is yours still loading and rendering like mine? Or are you having any issues?
So mine's loaded and I have a map of the world and I can see a cluster of dots around Los Angeles. But when I zoom in, I don't know how to zoom into Los Angeles. Like I can zoom into the middle of the Atlantic.
Yes. So that is where this helpful search feature comes in. So you'll see you have these new things that when you're working with a map. So you can search and then you can search Los Angeles, California, and it will just zoom you in directly to LA. And then what you're going to want to do is this arrow down here. Right now, the default is like a highlighted area. You can but I just kind of like to use my pointer as a moving around function. So that's what you just want to change it to the second icon, which looks like arrows in all four directions. It says pan. And then you can kind of move around LA and look at where different accidents happen. So this is kind of what I was having so far. I moved over to my previous loaded version of this same worksheet. So I clicked on density in marks instead of automatic. I went down to density so I could kind of see, where more accidents are happening. And if I zoom out a little bit, you can kind of see there's high density of traffic accidents around, maybe where is this? I don't think it's Santa Monica, maybe like Marina Del Rey area. We can see some accidents, like UCLA is a little safe haven because you obviously can't drive cars on UCLA's campus. Oh, it finally loaded something. So this I did to see the density a bit better, and you're wondering how I made the background black. How you can make the map background different is you can go up here to map. You'll see Tableau, file, data, worksheet, dashboard, story, analysis, map. And you can click on that and then you can do background maps. And I have mine set to dark right now, but you can switch it to normal, streets, anything. I'm not going to change it because it's loading right now and I don't want to stress it out too much. Okay, so this is just our first map. It's not the prettiest, we can explore with different types of marks and you can change the color if you so desire. And yeah, but for now, it's just a good starting place of a map. and we got the latitude longitude split. So I'll go back so we can follow along in real time on the next one. So let's create a new sheet. And now I'm kind of interested in looking at the age distribution of accidents. So we can go ahead and say age distribution of accidents. You know, we're just kind of like in setting intentions for what this sheet will eventually be. So how do we want to do this? Well, we know we want age to go along, you know, the x-axis. And then we kind of want some count of number of accidents by that age in the y. So just like before, we're going to take what we want on the x-axis and drag it to columns. So we want age. And down here, we have victim age. You can go ahead and drag this into columns. And so you'll see that because this was interpreted by Tableau as a continuous measure, because it's a column full of numbers, it has now performed an aggregate function on this and summed up all the victims' ages. So instead, we want to make sure that this is a dimension. It is used to describe someone in this sense, their age. But we still want it to be interpreted as continuous because it makes sense for age to be on a continuous scale versus like area ID is just 21 different ID numbers. So that doesn't need to be interpreted on a continuous scale, but this is good. Now we can see victim age here is a continuous dimension that we've made it. So now in our rows, we're going to want to go ahead and take number of accidents and drag it to rows. Mine's loading, and here we have number of accidents, but because there's no data on in between ages, it doesn't really make sense to have these all be connected. So instead of doing automatic, we would rather do a bar graph. So once it renders as a bar graph, the bars are a little bit too thick for my liking. There's huge overlap in between them. And so how you can change this is you can go into size. And decrease that size. Mine is loading and will eventually render. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and add some labels to this graph for context. So like, unless we scroll over this, we can't tell that there's 16,754 accidents where the victim's age was 30. So we can add number of accidents here, and we can drag that in to label. And this will just allow us to see some of the counts without having to scroll our mouse over all of them. Okay, and now you'll see it has the numbers directly up, and that is fine, you know, if you like it that way, but I don't really like reading my numbers vertically. So I can change this to, if we go into, okay, label, and then we go down to alignment, it says direction automatic, but I want it to read this way, up and down. Okay, for now, it is just staying the same way. So we can go ahead and mess around with that later. It is not too important. But now I kind of want to open it up to you guys and ask for anything interesting that you see in this distribution, or if you have any questions about this distribution.
There seem to be just like peaks at like the 30 and 35 sort of numbers, 40 and 45.
Yes, it's so interesting that has come up before in a previous workshop, and it wasn't something like I immediately noticed, but it is a fact. And I wonder if it's because if LAPD like doesn't know the age of the victim, if they just guess, or like if they guess to the closest 5-year mark. That is very interesting. Thank you. Does anyone else have something? Maybe it's
most of the crimes tend to be towards the younger ages. As you increase in age, the amount of crimes goes down.
Yes. Yeah, we're seeing a right skewed distribution. So, perhaps just a lot of people driving in these ages. And yeah, Anthony said those 98-year-olds can be dangerous. Iris said large amount of people aged 100, ? And Skylar has the answer to Hyun with click on victim age and choose dimension instead of measure. Yep. Yeah, that's what I found really interesting. Is like, why is there so many victims aged 99 here? And I looked at, I tried to go look at the metadata and see if they had any documentation for why they were doing this in victim age. And I couldn't really find anything, but what I assume it's just another thing. If they don't know the name, 99 can sometimes represent just a 2-digit number that you don't know the numbers are. So that's just like, I'm going to interpret that as unknown age, which is just interesting that they don't really specify why there's so many 99-year-olds. But good observations, guys. It's something that we might not have noticed if we hadn't had made a graph to look at it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create another sheet in our sheet tab. But if anyone has any more questions before I move on, just let me know. Okay, so I want to make another map. However, I don't want it to not load. So I'm just going to go back to this map that I had earlier that was still loading. And if your guys is loaded, you can just go back to this one and look at it. So now that we've kind of, made an age distribution of accidents, I'm kind of interested to see if we can see like how age relates to accidents on a map. So what we can do is we can take our victim age and drag it into color. Actually, okay, I'm just gonna make it, before I drag it in again, I'm just gonna make it, convert it to a dimension. So this will help it. It will always be a dimension, and then we won't have to change it in another step. So if you just go ahead, right click victim age and say convert to dimension. And then we just want to make sure it is, I want it to be continuous. Okay, there, yeah. So now you can see it is a green continuous dimension, and we can go ahead and drag that into color. And I would like to look at color, edit colors. So this blue for me isn't going to be the most helpful if I'm trying to think about age. So I can go into this color menu and, pick some colors that might resonate with me better. There's a greater contrast. There's a big contrast between red and green. So maybe let's just do that. And then you can also change it to be a stepped color. So we could kind of look at age groups, like 10 to 25, 25 to 40, 40 to 55, 55 to 70, 70, somewhere around that gap. And then we can go ahead and say, okay. So you'll see now mine zoomed into LA after all this time, and it might take a little while to render the victim age, so we won't stay here and look at it. But again, you can do the map, background maps, you can do light, normal, dark streets, anything you want just to see how that comes up. And if you say map layers, you can get more specific with things you want on this left-hand menu. If you want the terrain, but you don't want the county borders or something, or if you only want county borders, if you're making maybe something related to county data, you could go ahead and do that over here. But now I'll just click out of this map layers because I'm not using it. So let's go ahead and get to our second data source. I'll just start fresh on this sheet. And if you guys have already been to the link that is in the Google Doc, this is the second data set that you'll come to. And you can go ahead and say download, and then it'll come up with a bunch of different options, and you're going to want to download the shape file. Okay, so once you have it downloaded, we can come over here and go back to our data source page. And we're going to want to add a connection. So everyone should be on the data source page, add, then we're going to go to spatial file. And I've already kind of directed to here in my Finder, but if not, you can go to your downloads. You'll have to unzip this LAPD divisions. It'll be in a zip first, so you can just do that separately, and then click on LAPD_divisions.shp and say open. Is everyone with me? You have to make sure that you unzip it wherever it is in your downloads, and then you'll be able to see the folder and click on the .shp file. Yes. So how you get to the connections tab is it's this data source tab. So we have all our sheets down here in the bottom, but we're going to click on the very leftmost one, which is data source. Up here, you see this word connections, and next to it, you'll see add. Add, spatial file, and then navigate your way to LAPD_divisions.shp. I'm not going to open it another time, but it is here. Okay. So now how we want to get these to interact is we're going to need to drag this in to need more data. So sorry, not this one up here. We can go ahead and click on this file, LAP_division and under files, and drag it into here. And you'll see this orange connector come up, and just drop it, release it. And now they need a way to connect. So, if you're doing this in Python or R or something, you'd say, merge on these certain columns are equal to each other. So it's asking us just for the same thing. What columns are equal? So I did a little background research, but if you were to open these both up, you could kind of look at which columns are similar. So it's area ID, which is the 22 different LAPD divisions. And then in here, in this file, it is just called PREC. And now they have a relationship to each other. They are connected on area ID and PREC, you will see. Okay, so now that we have them connected, we can go head over to sheet 6. And now on the left-hand side, if you scroll up, there will no longer only be traffic collisions data, but you'll also see our new LAPD underscore divisions.shp. So what we want to do here is double click on geometry. And when you double click on geometry, it will kind of automatically render the areas presented in the shapefile, which are the 22 different districts that we saw when we went to download the data. And because I'm having trouble loading, I'm going to go ahead back over to my preloaded one, and it should look something like this. So yours might not be right here yet, but this is because I added the map background of streets. I think that's really relevant if we're looking, at traffic accident data to be able to see the streets in the background. So that's where I went to map, background maps, and you'll see I have streets selected here. And there's another step that I did, which is aggregating the number of accidents. So we can go back down to our number of accidents variable. And what you want to do is drag this into, pick it up and drag it to color. And then you'll see it appear here, and it'll say aggregated number of accidents. So this is like a kind of a density map, but it's easier to see than like every single little dot. It kind of breaks it up by area. And so now we see, 77th Street, this correlates with our beginning accidents over time. They tend to be the highest in accidents. And then this is also reflected in it having the darkest blue color, which correlates with the highest number of accidents based on this legend over here. Yeah, so the columns used for matching were area ID in traffic collisions data, and the column PREC in the LAPD underscore divisions.shp shapefile. And then it also just chose to drag area name into label and area name into detail. So when I scan over this, I can see that this is West LA, this is West Valley, over here's Foothill, 77th Street, Southwest. Yes, area ID. The merging the files can be tricky because there's a bunch of different steps that go into it. So let me go ahead and just do this on this one that's having trouble loading anyway. So data source, the first thing that we did is, I'm just going to remove this so we can start fresh. So the first thing we did is we got the LAPD underscore divisions connection. We went add spatial file. I selected here. And then it kind of led me to my only spatial file saved on my computer. But if not, you can go to downloads. You can find your LAPD divisions, click on it, and then go shape. Click on that, open. I already have it here, and then you'll see I have it here. So once you have it in your connections, you'll see it in the files, and you'll take the files one and you'll drag and drop this, see the orange connection come up, and then you're going to match it on the traffic collisions data column that you want is area ID, and the LAPD divisions thing you want is PREC. And now you have a relationship between these two tables. And then what we did on our new sheet is we scrolled up and we found geometry, the only geographical data type in the LAPD_divisions file, and we double clicked on it. And then that renders a map of all the different areas. And then from here, what you can do is you drag number of accidents into color. And then you will get a map that looks like this if you have the map background as streets. So it's a 3-step process. Number 1, double click geometry. Number 2, drag number of accidents into color. Number 3, go up to map up top and say background maps streets. Yeah, so if yours is showing up as a total or a sum, let us see what we can do. Yes, and number of accidents was created by us. I'm not too sure why you are seeing a sum. Okay. I think it might be that perhaps you haven't moved area name into detail yet. And so that is a necessary step that I didn't include in my 1, 2, 3. So that's going to be your 4th step. So let's find area name here and go ahead and drag it into detail. I already have it in detail. But that then should then aggregate it for each area name instead of doing a total sum. Yay. And I think PREC might be short for precinct. I am unsure, but if you look at the website, you can find the metadata and it might tell you. Okay, so let's animate this map. So what we're going to do is we don't want to change anything just yet, and we like this plain one. So what we're going to do is duplicate it. And then you'll see we have the same map, but it's on a new slide. And we want to animate it over time again. I kind of want to look at how accidents have increased over time. So does anyone, it's the same exact trick we did from last time. What variable do we move where to do animation? You can go ahead and unmute or say it in the chat. We did it on sheet number 2 and sheet number 3 with accidents over time. Yes. Yes, Iris. Yes, Courtney. And yes, Raymond. So we are going to drag the date occurred into pages. This is our little animation section. So date occurred, drag it up into pages. And what I want to look at is I want to look at total accidents over time. So I want to do like the running total again. So instead of it being, we want to add a quick table calculation, just like we did on the last one, and do running total. And then we have to click on it again and say compute using date occurred. So just again, we dragged the date occurred into pages. And then we did running total for quick table calculation, and we did date occurred for compute using. And I think just a better color to represent accidents in my mind, and to separate from the last one, I'm going to go ahead and use red. You can use whatever color that you like. So you'll see that in 2010, which we are in now, it starts off, they all start off pretty pale because there's not too many accidents, and you see that there's a range up to 37,000 accidents. So let's go ahead and press play and see if we can, see the darkening over time, see the more accidents, 2016, 2017. Yeah, so we can kind of see, how 77th Street has taken the lead and become the area with the most traffic accidents, and West LA and Pacific are pretty similar in their number of accidents over the past 10 years. Foothill looks like, a more rural area, has less accidents and things like that. And Iris, I see that you say it didn't work for you, so we can just, go over the steps. I can see if it's maybe loaded on this one, not yet. Okay, so the steps for this one that we're going to want to do is number one, double click on geometry, and that'll populate geometry here and longitude and latitude. And then you'll have something of like a basic map with all these different sections, but they won't be different colors or anything yet. It'll just be that.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I do have the map, but what wasn't working is actually that it still is just showing as a sum of all the accidents. So I didn't know if you knew how far I'd gotten along, but I just didn't want you to have to explain the whole thing.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so if you're only seeing the sum, that is the crucial step of we have to drag area name into detail. So that is what is going to allow the number of accidents to be split across this dimension of area name instead of doing just like a total sum. So then we can see accidents in all the different areas.
I do have area name in detail, so I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not working.
Interesting. And do you have number of accidents in color?
Yes.
Okay.
But that, so I think at the beginning, someone had said that their number of accidents is a sum and not an aggregate, which is also the case with me.
Okay. Interesting. I think, yeah, for hers, it was resolved by moving the area name into detail, but perhaps maybe if you right click on it, it's doing a calculation of some sort. And if not, you can just start a new sheet and see if, if you try all the same things, but just on a fresh blank sheet, if perhaps.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so these are all the visualizations that I had planned to teach you guys today. So I'm going to open it up into questions. Could we quickly go over how to calculate the number of accidents occurred? Yeah. Okay. So how to calculate the number of accidents occurred. This was one of the first steps that we did in the workshop. So if you were a little late, you might have missed this step. And what we do is we go to DR number and we right click it and we say create calculated field. And then we type in the function count. We put parentheses around it, and then we can name this number of accidents. And then you would just say, okay. And then it would appear down here in equal sign number of accidents. And that's kind of what we've been using to make all the visualizations thus far. Yeah. So the count function kind of works like in a coding language. If you were doing like, if you wanted the count of accidents in each area, you would group it by the area name, and then you would count how many accidents are in that area. But what this function in Tableau kind of allows us to do is it allows us to just say count for now, and then it allows us to choose the dimension that we want to kind of group it by. So for a lot of these visualizations, we've been counting it by area name. Like in this one, we're counting West LA has 29,000 accidents, but you can also just, the count can apply to any dimension that you want to break it up by. So if you wanted to break it up by, victim sex, you could see how many accidents where men or women are the victims. Yeah, when you locally save it, it'll save the whole workbook, which is all of them. Yeah, for the age distribution, there is a great way to change. I know it automatically does the bars overlapping, which seems silly. But so if you're on this sheet, we can do size and move this thing to the left to make the bars narrower. How did you get the prominent points to have labels? Can you export individual visualizations? Exporting individual ones, I'm not too sure. If you do it in Tableau Public, you can look at all the individual ones. Sometimes what I do is if I want to put it in a presentation, I will like take a screenshot of it if it's something like this. And then, I'll just put that into a presentation. But how did you get the prominent points to have labels? Joshua, are you referring to like maybe one of these visualizations where we had like where some of them have labels?
No, just the numbers on top of the bar graph in those wherever you were.
Yeah. So I did that by dragging in the number of accidents into label. And you'll see that just right below here. And then it just gives you some, but you can say allow labels to overlap other marks. And like that will put all of them on there if you want, but it's a little bit harder to see. So just, you can mess around with it and see if you like it one way or the other. Okay. Yeah, feel free to continue asking questions. But that is all that I have for today. All these visualizations. And just before anyone leaves, I'm just going to stop share real quick and get a link for you guys, which is the feedback form. So you don't have to fill this out, but if you want to fill it out, we'd really appreciate it. And it'll help us improve our future workshops. And Tim has linked it. And there is recording that we can send out to participants. I think we have everyone's emails. Is that correct? When you signed up, did you have to put your email? I think so.
Yeah, we do. We have everybody's email, and I'll provide a link to our channel in YouTube that it'll show up in case you want to follow that.
Yeah, and thanks, Christian, for saying how to export a workbook and how to export animation. it'll be contained in the workbook, so it should also contain that. Tim linked the YouTube channel.
I was going to add that we tried to catch all your questions and add them to the Etherpad. So if you had a question in the chat, the question and the answer should also be in the Etherpad if you wanted to look those up.
Yeah, and then just link the Etherpad. Oh, did that link not work?
Yeah, the earlier link had an error and we updated it. So the updated link is on the Etherpad and that's the one that we'll send out to.
Okay. Thank you guys all for following along and interacting and asking questions. I had a great time.
I want to just motivate. I also will provide a link to the Data Squad. We have a website. You can, I think as Julia mentioned in the beginning, she's part of the Data Squad. So it's like a consultant group that is student led, and they can help you with any problems you have with working with your data or your research. So reach out and you can set up an appointment. The other thing is this workshop is part of a series that's going to teach Tableau, R for social scientist. So we'll have an introduction to R on Tuesday. We'll do data wrangling in R the following Tuesday. We'll teach data visualization the Tuesday after that. We'll even do R Markdown and report generation. So I'll provide some links to that, send you an email out about when the YouTube video is up. And yeah, thank you for coming. And many thanks to Julia for teaching what a wonderful workshop, actually. So thank you very much.
Thank you.